Welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please welcome your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Functional Medicine Radio Show, the only internet radio show dedicated to giving you real solutions to improve your health. Not only are they real solutions, but they're natural solutions as well, because as you know, the one and only true wealth you have is your health. I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc, and I'm committed to helping you find the root cause of your health problem, fix the cause with natural treatments so you can feel normal again and live your life to the fullest. Today's topic is about digestive health. I'm so very excited about today's show because my special guest is Kristen Thomas. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Kristen Thomas is a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and holistic health coach with additional training in digestive health, hormone balancing, SIBO, thyroid conditions, detoxification, and stealth infectious disease. She has lived through chronic illness and reversed her own ulcerative colitis and other health challenges such as leaky gut, food sensitivities, hormone imbalance, and a half a dozen gut infections. Kristen, thank you so much for being my special guest today on this episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show.
I'm so excited to be here, Dr. Carri.
Can you first start with telling us about your story? How did you heal your digestive tract from ulcerative colitis and all of those gut infections?
Yes, it's been quite the journey over the past decade or so. As most people begin, figuring out what's going on and how they can start to feel some relief, I began the conventional medicine route. After several rounds of treatments there and really only seeing issues get worse, I just kind of had a light bulb come off in my brain that, something just wasn't adding up. Things weren't working, and I had to take a different approach. And so I started to do some research in terms of how I could turn to food as medicine, because at that point I just knew that a lot of foods weren't working for me, and I saw a pretty direct correlation between when I ate foods and my ulcerative colitis symptoms flaring up. So I figured that was the first place that I could begin. And so I began to eat, I guess we could call a paleo diet. So, pretty much really clean meats, veggies, fruits, things like that. And within 2 weeks, I felt a world of difference. And it was, noticeable change that I had never felt before. And I just knew that I was onto something. And it was just such, an addictive feeling because I was finally feeling better after years of just feeling terrible every single day. And really from there, I started working with several functional and holistic practitioners who could kind of help me dig in even further. So, continued on the food journey, continued to fine tune my diet, ran some food sensitivity testing, ran some, in-depth testing to find out what other pathogens and infections were causing this inflammation in my body, began to address those with herbal treatments, and really just kind of continued down from there. But at this point, I have been completely cleared of my ulcerative colitis. My acid reflux is totally gone. My SIBO conditions have completely resolved themselves, and I'm just in such a better position than I ever thought I could be in such a short period of time.
Do you mind sharing with us the gut testing that you went through and the infections that they found?
Sure. So I've run, in sort of my journey the past couple of years in doing all of this, I've probably run a handful or so of different stool tests. The one that I ran on myself that I found the most information from, and the one that I now run on my clients, is called the GI map test, which is a DNA-based stool analysis that's able to find things like parasites, bacteria, yeast, fungus, and several other digestive health markers. So when I first started running these tests on myself and with other practitioners earlier on in my journey, before I was a functional practitioner, I found that I had right off the bat a parasite, and And then soon after, I realized I ran another test and I found that I had H. pylori, which is a pretty nasty bacteria infection in the stomach. And that one really closely correlated with how I was feeling. Just all my digestive health complaints were very closely linked to all the common symptoms related to H. pylori. And then from there, an additional test that I ran probably a year later found that I had candida and still a little bit of dysbiosis or bacterial imbalance. So really kind of each time I ran one of these tests, which is every like 6 to 12 months, I kind of found that I was peeling back the layers even deeper and really, getting more into what else is going on in my system. So as I addressed each sort of major pathogen like the parasite and H. pylori, and candida, I was finding that less and less major things like those were showing up on my tests, and it was more so just a little bit of bacteria imbalances here and there that I was able to even more easily address. So it was kind of a very methodical process, addressing the main things that were going on for me, calming down the system, but continuing to do that investigative work to make sure that everything was taken care of.
Like you, I practice in a way that I find testing is vitally important. So I'll often run gut testing, different gut panels on patients to try and figure out if they have infections, where are their infections, how do we treat their infections. Yes. So I'll test them and then I'll treat them and then I'll retest them to make sure that, the treatment worked or not. So I think when we talk about digestive issues, I think most people have an idea of what symptoms they would probably have if they had a digestive issue. But what are some of the other signs and symptoms that can hint at a potential digestive health problem that people may not necessarily associate with the gut?
Yeah. So I love this question because and as I've gotten more into this, both myself personally and also professionally, just the vast ways that digestive health issues can present themselves in the body really go well beyond just, basic stomach pains and constipation and things like that. So a lot of things that can also signal a potential digestive health issue are things like poor sleep. So if somebody is having trouble getting to sleep or staying asleep, like they're waking up pretty often, that can be a sign that they have a digestive health issue for a couple of reasons. Number one, a lot of pathogens, like parasites in particular, actually have sort of an opposite circadian rhythm or waking cycle as we do. They're actually more active at night. And so if somebody has, a pathogen infection like a parasite, and they're feeling sort of that wired feeling at night, it could be that that's going on. If there is just general, infections going on in the system, that can, be a stressor on the body, which can raise our cortisol levels, which can keep us awake, or, potentially wake us up during the middle of the night. So there's a lot of sort of, functional ways to look at why we're not sleeping, but very often that's happening. Or just in general, somebody is truly just in pain or, going to the bathroom very often, that in and of itself can wake people up or prevent them from having a restful sleep. Low energy is also another huge sign. So if your system isn't able to, digest the foods that you're eating, even if you're eating super healthy, kale salads every day and smoothies and all that good stuff, if your system, isn't able to fully break down that food, whether because there's just so much inflammation, or the pathogens are kind of getting in the way, or there's, reduced capacity to produce enzymes or acid in order to even break down the foods, you're not able to get the nutrients into your cells that from your food that your body even needs to have energy in the first place. So, that can go a long way towards, not feeling fully awake and energized when you first get up and not continuing to have much energy throughout the day. Irritability and depression and anxiety, so like a lot of mood-based and brain-related conditions can sort of arise out of all of this. The mind-gut connection is extremely strong. If things in the gut aren't too happy, then things up in the brain aren't going to be happy too. The concept of our gut kind of being our second brain couldn't be more true. There's a nerve actually in our body that goes from about your abdomen area up to your brain called the vagus nerve. And if, it sends signals basically. And so if you're having issues down in the gut, that's actually going to send a signal to your brain that, hey, things aren't going so well. We're not feeling so good. So a lot of people can, kind kind of by a result have some of those mood imbalances or just not feel like themselves anymore. And there's a whole, host of, dozens of other, things that can be going on in the body that can cause those mood disorders, but a lot of them can be related to the gut for sure. And the last one that I typically see with people that's this kind of a hidden sign of digestive health issues are skin rashes or irritation. So if somebody has just kind of unexplained patches of like dry, itchy rashes, sometimes I see it on the legs, on the face, sometimes even the back of the upper arm. There'll be some rashes, which often is linked to gluten, actually. Those can typically be related to, some type of infection. It could be like a skin-based infection, like a yeast. It could be, like I said, from gluten. It could just be a result of some other inflammation or infection going on in the body that's kind of presenting itself outwardly on the skin.
Okay, so to recap, you mentioned sleep and energy issues, mood imbalances, skin rashes, irritations. I'm also going to add to that list chronic pain and hormonal imbalances that I see in my practice is commonly have some kind of a gut component as part of their puzzle, and it's like a vicious cycle that the patient is getting into. And then to go back to sleep, you mentioned about cortisol being spiked during the night because of the stress of the pathogens on the body. The other thing that I think of too is that when people have insomnia, I wonder if they have underlying gut infections and if those gut infections are depleting their melatonin levels. Because melatonin is for our sleep-wake cycle, but it's also a very powerful anti-inflammatory compound that our body makes naturally. Right. And your body might be using that melatonin up to quench the fire going on in the gut. And then that's why you're waking up during the middle of the night. Potentially.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of times when I'm doing stool testing with clients, we're pretty much simultaneously running some hormone panels. And, melatonin is a hormone. And so typically when I'm running those in parallel and I see that the melatonin is out of whack and they have gut dysfunction, that pretty closely correlates with what's going on with their sleep. So
there are so many different reasons why digestive issues are so much more common today. Genetically modified foods, eating too many prepared prepackaged foods, the glyphosate Roundup pesticides that is used in our food supply. Oh my gosh, so many different reasons. What are the most common ones that you see in your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the common, issues that I'm seeing today in my practice are things like constipation and diarrhea are, some of the first things that my clients tell me are going wrong because, if you're going to the bathroom multiple times a day, maybe even more frequently if you're kind of skewing towards the diarrhea, or maybe much less, maybe even a couple times a week if you're skewing towards constipation, that obviously is a big change from, what was probably normal early on in your life. And that can, those can be very closely correlated with your diet, with your lifestyle. So, when we're eating, foods that have, chemicals in them, or they're just like very like processed foods or convenience foods that are, loaded with food items. Well, I say food in quotes, food items, because, our bodies just aren't recognizing what those foods are. And it doesn't recognize them as nutritional foods that it can actually utilize for energy and regular function. And, so when we're kind of giving our bodies that level of food with a poor nutritional, concentration of food items, it's just so hard for our systems to, operate normally. And so we can get constipated, or if there's like inflammation going on, we can sometimes have diarrhea because the system just truly, cannot process the foods. And we're just kind of expelling the foods pretty quickly. So those are some pretty common ones. Of course, stress can play into things like constipation and diarrhea, depending on how it's presenting with someone. And, again, sort of taking a functional approach to all of this. There's a lot of other things that can be going on that could be at the root of those. Another very common issue that I see with clients is acid reflux. And, I'm seeing very heavy over medication on acid reflux. Most of my clients who come to me with this have been on proton pump inhibitor medications like Nexium for, 10 plus years. And, what this does is it really kind of suppresses your body's ability to produce stomach acid. And over time, we end up having, not too much stomach acid, but we end up having too little stomach acid. So I have a lot of my clients do an easy at-home baking soda test that can start to give us some indicators in terms of how low or not their stomach acid levels are. And with that, we can actually pretty easily start to address the acid reflux issue and help to actually build up the acid levels in an amount that the body actually needs to break down the foods. So, those are constipation, diarrhea, acid reflux are typically the most common things that I hear people say right off the bat that they have. But more often than not, people are coming to me with a whole host of issues, as they're coming to most functional practitioners with, they've had complex issues for years or maybe their entire life, and they've tried to see so many different doctors and other practitioners for, people have told them that their, blood results and everything looks fine, but they know they don't feel fine. And if anything, they're seeing issues progress and get worse, and they're just feeling farther and farther away from their normal selves. And in the meantime, just kind of put on those heavy medications, and which in and of itself can have a lot of consequences. So, I see a lot of complex things, but those are typically the most common things that most everybody coming to me has.
And then, can you take a moment and go back and describe to our listeners what the baking soda test is?
Yes. So the baking soda test is a really easy at-home test that you can do. So, anybody who's listening is wondering if their if their stomach acid levels are adequate. So what you can do is first thing in the morning, and you want to do this for about 5 days in a row around the same time each day on an empty stomach. So that's why I say first thing in the morning before you've had food. You're going to mix about a quarter of a teaspoon of baking soda with about half to a full cup of water. And you're going to drink that. And then set a timer on your phone. You want to drink it, pretty quickly. Set a timer on your phone. And you want to time how long it takes you to burp after you drink the baking soda and water combination. And I have a guide on my site, but it basically breaks down, how soon it takes you to burp and how that relates to your potential acid production. I think if it's within 2 minutes or so, you have adequate levels, and kind of the longer it takes you to go on, the lower acid levels you have. So when I first did this test on myself, it took me about 20 minutes to burp. And that was totally on the skew of having very low acid levels. And since I've been working on that, it's been getting better and better, but it's certainly a process. But it's always good for people to kind of just run that baseline test, get an idea, run that over 5 days to kind of see, if there's a trend, and be able to get that, initial data to see where your acid levels might be.
Kristen, what are 3 things that listeners can start doing today to begin to improve their digestion? Mm-hmm. And what are some of the things that you see most people are not doing?
Yes, definitely. So let's see. So things that people are typically not doing, but that can certainly help with their digestion. So one of them, the first one I'm going to say, it sounds extremely simple, but you'd be surprised how many people are not doing this today. And it's chewing your food thoroughly.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
Yes.
It's true.
So it sounds so basic, and we're like, well, obviously I'm chewing my food, but are you really chewing your food? And the reason that that's so important and why so many people aren't doing it today is because, think about how stressed and how busy so many of us are today, right? We're eating on the go. We're rushing through lunch to get back to that 1 o'clock work meeting. We're eating in the car or on the train on the way to work. We're snacking in between, whatever is going on in life. We're not, sitting down as much to have meals, taking the time to chew, sitting at the table for an hour to really enjoy our food. We're rushing through it, and we're not thinking about it. We're multitasking. We're, we're binge watching Netflix. We're on our phones. We're just doing things that aren't allowing us to actually focus on the event of eating our food. We're doing other things around that, and food kind of comes secondary. So
what are some of the things that you have people do or change in their lives so that it sets them up for success so that they are chewing their food?
Mm-hmm. So, a couple of things. So putting away the electronics. So if you typically, eat with your phone nearby and have a habit of checking, Instagram or Facebook while you're eating, put that away. Maybe have everybody in your family just put their phones up in their bedrooms or just in another room. Turn off the TV. So many of us are, just eating by the TVs. And again, we're just scarfing down our meals while we're watching our favorite show. Turn off the TV, actually sit at the dining room or kitchen table with your family, friends, whoever you live with, and actually focus on, having great conversations, focus on the smell of your food, focus on chewing your food, and just being present. Those are two of the biggest things that people can start to do.
And then any other tips around chewing food?
So generally, rule of thumb is chew about 30 chews per bite, depending on, what the food is. Like if you're chewing, of course, like meats or like tougher veggies or nuts or seeds, absolutely you should be chewing about 30 bites. And just making sure that, that's fully soaking your food before you swallow it and go on to your next bite.
And so what else do you see that most people are not doing?
Mm-hmm. So another thing is not addressing stress. So stress has such a huge impact on our digestion. So our bodies basically have, at a very basic level, our bodies have two different modes. It's fight or flight or rest and digest. And those are controlled by our nervous system. And so as you can imagine, when we're in the fight or flight, our bodies cannot simultaneously be in rest and digest and able to break down our food. So if we're super stressed, even if it's just chronic stress from everyday things that are going on, and you're not allowing your body to sort of shift into that rest and digest when you're about to eat a meal, it's going to be a lot harder for your body to digest food. So some ways that I encourage people to help to shift their bodies into that state when you're about to have a meal is, again, going back to like turning off electronics and other distractions and chewing. But other things are actually becoming present with your meal. So taking a couple of deep breaths before you even dive into your food to become present, leave all those stressors and all the worries on your mind behind, even if for the next 20 minutes. Smelling your food and just becoming closer with it can really sort of help to shift your body into that rest and digest state so that your body can divert its resources to the digestive tract so that you can produce the right levels of acid and enzymes and entice your muscular contractions across your GI tract to begin to come into motion, signaling to your body that you're about to eat food. I think a lot of people just sort of, see stress as this thing that's kind of out there, but they don't really know what to do with it, or they might not even recognize how closely linked it is to impacting your digestion. So, taking even just one step each day to help to address it, whether it is just a couple of deep breaths before you eat, or removing the electronics, or, maybe doing some yoga right after work and before dinner, or meditation, or taking an Epsom salt bath at some point during the day, or something that is self-care, self-loving, that can help to, combat anxiety, stress, whatever's coming up for you so that you can put your body into that state, has such a profound impact.
And if I can add another thing to that list of how to address stress, as you were speaking, what came to my mind is that, in some cultures, people will say a prayer before they eat. And so then I just had an epiphany. So thank you, Kristen. I just had an epiphany that, part of praying actually puts you in that relaxation zone. Mm-hmm. And so people who pray, or if you don't pray, just practicing gratitude of thinking of 3 to 5 things before you start eating, 3 to 5 things in your life that you are truly grateful for, that happened in your day or whatnot. Just taking a moment and just really sinking into that feeling of thankfulness, gratitude, whether you do it through gratitude or through prayer. I can see how that can totally put somebody out of stress and into relaxation, into that rest and digest zone.
Absolutely, yes. I love the idea of gratitude. That's a practice that I brought in actually to my own daily routine a couple of years ago. It's something I do first thing in the morning and at night before I go to bed. And that I really noticed over time a big shift in my mindset. And so, yeah, for somebody who wants to bring that to maybe a pre-meal activity, that's fantastic.
And then what's one more thing that you see most people are not doing?
Mm-hmm. So another big thing is just not listening to the signals that your body is actually sending you when you're having food. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we just, again, we're rushing through the meals. We're not really correlating how, what we're eating and how we're eating with how we are feeling. But a lot of times, people will come to me and say, well, I get bloated throughout the day. I get pain, blah, blah, blah. And I'll ask them, is that related to food? And they'll say, well, Kristen, I actually have no idea. I've never paid attention to it. And so what I encourage people to do, and everybody who's listening to this to start to do, is just start to begin to listen to what your body is telling you after you are eating, or even while you are eating. Are there certain foods you're eating that are causing the bloating? Like after maybe you have dairy in a meal, you're getting bloated or stomach cramps or pains. And maybe after, you eat something with gluten or wheat in it, you're feeling a little foggy and low in energy. Or maybe after you eat sugar, you're feeling all wired for, 30 minutes and then you have that crash. So being able to notice things like that is hugely important, because that is a huge sign from your body that maybe those foods aren't working for you and they're actually causing some other issues. But for people who are already eating really clean and maybe already don't have things like gluten or dairy and sugar in their lives, other foods can still be triggers for them. And it might not be such, a harsh reaction as dairy or gluten might cause. It might be more of like a food sensitivity reaction, which is a lot more of a subtle reaction or a delayed reaction to food, but it's still just as important to know. And that's where food journaling can come in really useful. And this is something that every single person who works one-on-one with me is encouraged to do right off the bat, is begin to write down your foods and how you are feeling. And over time, people start to notice like, oh, when I have beans, I actually feel like I get more constipated that week. Or, I notice that when I have apples, my stomach kind of feels funky, or, any number of things, or maybe even coconut, it's causing bloating. Like really healthy foods can still have individual effects on people depending on, what is going on inside of your system. And so that's why it's so important to be able to, customize your diet in a way that's going to work for you. And one of the easiest and arguably cheapest ways to begin to, go on that process is just by writing down your foods and starting to listen to your body and what is going on. As soon as I did that in my health journey, that just has such an eye-opening effect on how things like coconut and eggs, for example, were just no-goes for me for quite a while. And it just, I've seen with all of my clients, it's just, really kind of transformed their relationship with food, understanding how their body is, and really helping them to dial in on what foods are working for them so that they can hone in on those and begin to remove the others.
So to recap these 3 tips that Kristen shared with us, and these are all very good reminders: chew your food thoroughly, address the stress, and listen to your body. Mm-hmm. Kristen, how can our listeners find out more about you?
Sure. So my website is thrivebyfood.com, where I am constantly blogging about all things digestive health. So if you want to dig in more and get real about things like poop and what you're eating and food sensitivities and all that good stuff, I'm always writing about that. And I'm pretty active on Instagram and Facebook. On Instagram, you can find me at thrivebyfood, and my Facebook page is facebook.com/thrivebyfood.
So I'll make sure for the listeners out there, I'll make sure all of those resources are in our podcast notes so that you can easily find Kristen and all of her valuable information. Kristen, thank you so much for being my special guest today. This has been an awesome interview.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carri.
All right, this wraps up this very special episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show with Kristen Thomas. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in today. And I'd like to invite you back next time for another episode of the Functional Medicine Radio Show. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, the Functional Medicine Doc. Have a great week, everyone.
You've been listening to the Functional Medicine Radio Show with your host, Dr. Carri Drzyzga, known internationally as the Functional Medicine Doc. Dr. Carri is committed to helping patients find the root cause of their health problems and fixing the cause with natural treatments so they can feel normal again. Dr. Carri is the founder of Functional Medicine Ontario and is the author of the hit book, Reclaim Your Energy and Feel Normal Again. Please tell your friends about the Functional Medicine Radio Show, and we'll see you next week with more from Dr. Carri.